So let's get started on our next panel today. Conservatism 2.0, finding common ground for the future. Lots of issues that split the party, lots of things that are up for discussion. What can we find that we can see, get together on, and sort of agree to disagree on? And we're going to be talking about some red meat issues out here. And we'd like to remind you that you can go to PJTV and vote on these issues. When we're done here, you can get to the website and we can talk about that. So, common ground, and what we've done is we put together a panel of conservatives and Republicans and libertarians who have very different views about these social issues. We're going to talk about those different views and see if we can find a way to agree on what we disagree on, because it's either a big tent or it's a small coffin. Those are our choices. We've got to think about a way to find this and make this thing happen. So, okay, you want to take the corner? There we go. All right, let's get going. Our first guest, ladies and gentlemen, is a writer on the web. He's got one of the sharpest minds. I'm sorry, I was just told by the little fairies in my ear that they want you right over here. And by fairies, I mean impish little you know, fence.
He calls you
one
guys.
More. Got it. All right, it's clear to me now. All right, here we go. He is a satirist. He is a remarkable man. He came here on a 24-hour horse and buggy ride from his right-wing religious nut compound in Zionsville, Pennsylvania. Help me welcome the writer of ScrappleFace.com, my friend, Mr. Scott Ott. Thank you, buddy. Good to have you with us. Our third panelist is a remarkable man. He's a remarkable analyst, a very, very smart man. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He's the author of the book Independent Nation, How Centrists Can Change American Politics. He's going to be anchoring this move to the center position. His name is John Avlon, and in the ongoing war between the red and blue, he is a proud and defiant purple. Help us welcome John Avlon to the stage today. Thank you, John. Good to be here. And finally, I have to say one last thing about our last panelist. You know, when I started out as a blogger, if you're a blogger, if you know bloggers out there, you put a lot of work into these things, you work very hard, you put them on the web, you don't get a dime, you don't get paid. All you ever hope for is the chance that somebody will read your work. And if you get 60 hits an hour, probably 50 of those are you checking your own counter and finding out what's going on. Occasionally, if you're lucky, there will come a time when you look at your referrers and all of a sudden it starts to happen. Incoming hits from Instapundit, 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 Instapundit. It's called an Instalanche. I would not be here today without this next gentleman. Many of you out there wouldn't be either. If this is Gilligan's Island, we can call him the professor, the blog father, the Instapundit. Help me welcome Glenn Reynolds, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, buddy. Good to have you with us. Okay, common ground. Look, when we talk about what makes conservatives, what makes the GOP, what makes Republicans, lots of different definitions here. So let's start by eliminating some things. What do we know we can agree on if we're conservatives? I think the first thing we can agree on is limited government. So limited government would definitely be one of the tenets of small parties that we want to be talking about. What's the second thing we can agree on? Lower taxes. What's a third thing that we can probably agree on as conservatives? Strong national defense. And what's the fourth pillar of this giant conservative movement? I think the fourth pillar, of course, is a deep and abiding love for bacon. I know you've written an awful lot about that, Professor Reynolds, at many times in the past. So we can agree on these things. We know that's what we agree on. What do we have differences with? We all have different opinions on some of these red meat social issues. So let's start staking out our opinions and then seeing if we can find a way to agree to disagree. And let's just cut right to the chase here, because this is one of these issues that absolutely defines the conservative movement, and that issue, of course, is abortion. Abortion is a fundamental social issue. It is a fundamental dividing line that splits the country. And so the question we have is this: is abortion a social choice, or is abortion just plain murder? Is it something in between? I know we all have differing opinions about this. Scott, what do you think?
I think I would avoid the use of the word murder simply because under our current laws it is not defined as such. However, I think we can all agree that we love people. I love babies. Had 4 of them in partnership with a woman I know called my wife. She did most of the work. I just said push. And you know, I think if we start looking at it in terms of how do you compromise on the scale of social conservatives to just fiscal conservatives, the tough thing about compromise on the issue of abortion is until you get all the way over to my position, somebody winds up dead. And that makes it very difficult to compromise. It makes it very difficult to find a middle ground position. And so I think that there are also some implications from a moral standpoint. I sometimes wonder whether the struggles we have as a party come from our failure to be able to be willing to take strong moral stands. We can express moral outrage about some things like somebody spending too much of our money, and yet we sort of quibble and equivocate when it comes to something as important as the possibility, even if you don't agree with at what stage during the pregnancy, but the possibility that we may in fact be taking a human life who is a non-enemy combatant.
John, you are a man who deeply and profoundly understands the relationship of political positions to actually getting votes. I can't speak for you for your position, but I certainly know that there is an argument to be made that holding on to abortion as an issue is costing the GOP a lot of votes, that most people feel it's a choice issue. How do you feel that affects the electability of the GOP?
Well, I don't think it's right to talk about abortion in the context of political practicality. I think one thing everyone can agree on is that every abortion is a tragedy. When I was growing up, there used to be an ad that used to run that said, "Life, what a beautiful choice." Choice is a key word in that. You know, I believe activists on either side are deeply divided on this issue, and it's passionately held. I do not believe, if you look at the data, that the American people are deeply divided. So over 60% consistently say the choice to have an abortion should be a woman, her doctor, her family, and her God, not the government. And an equal number say that a third trimester abortion, partial birth abortion, should be outlawed. There is room to find common ground even on this most difficult personal issue. And if you want to work your way back, talk about limited government, talk about lower taxes, strong defense. The common philosophical undergird of all this is individual freedom. And on this issue and on a lot of other issues, I think it's time we need to confront. During this conference, there's been a lot of talk about how the GOP lost its way because it wasn't conservative enough, particularly on fiscal issues, right? And that's agreed upon. You want to bridge out to the center? That's absolutely right. But there is a contradiction at the heart of modern conservatism which needs to be confronted, and it has to do with individual freedom, the rhetoric of individual freedom versus the rhetoric of social conservatism. And there has got to be at least a big tent. And so many folks who are fiscally conservative and socially libertarians have effectively closeted themselves in this debate. They are intimidated, they speak timidly, they are afraid to articulate their views, whether they're pro-gay rights or pro-choice, because they're afraid they'll be excluded. They'll be seen as irrelevant. And what they need to understand is they need to stand up and start changing the terms of the debate, because the Republican Party has got to be at least a big tent. Otherwise, libertarians need to realistically ask why they're affiliating with the Republican Party at all anymore.
All right,